Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 2019 Government Competitiveness Conference. My name is Sehi Kim. I am one of the senior researchers in the Center of Government Competitiveness. It is my great honor to moderate today's conference. To begin, I would like to thank all of you on behalf of the Research Center for sparing your precious time. A brief outline of today's conference is as following. First, each distinguished guest will be introduced, and Professor Tobin Im of Seoul National University will give an opening speech. Then, as a main content of today's conference, Dr. Ki-hoon Chung will make a presentation regarding the two main topics of today. The first part will focus on the role of government going into the fourth industrial revolution, and the second part will be on the main findings of this year's government competitiveness research and our report. There will be a short coffee break in between or after the entire presentation so we can have a moment to think through and relax. After Dr. Chung's presentation, we will move on to an open discussion session. Hopefully we get to hear many of our special guests' valuable thoughts and opinions regarding the topics visited today, and also in relation to the GC results. Lastly, we will gather at the end to take a group photo. Now let me introduce our guest of today. Actually, there are three more on the way, hopefully, to our school. But two, our special guests are here, and I would like to introduce Ambassador Yasmin from Embassy of Rwanda. Thank you for being with us. And I would like to welcome Second Secretary, Mr. Valery Pedrokov. Okay. Lastly, we have a faculty member of a graduate school of public administration at Seoul National University joining today. Please welcome Professor Taehyun Choi. Okay. Now that we are introduced, we'll be followed by the Professor Tobin Im's opening remark. Professor Im is currently the Dean of Graduate School of Public Administration at Seoul National University. He is also a senior faculty here and director of our Government Competitiveness Research Center. Please welcome Professor Im.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this conference. I would like to extend my warm welcome to all of you here, and particularly to the ambassadors and representatives from many countries. We have Her Excellency Yasmin Amneshed, who is ambassador of Rwanda, and also we have Mr. Valery Fredorkov from Russia. My university campus is located as a remote area from the center of the city. This university is actually poor in terms of financial capacity, but we have a very beautiful scenery, and you are lucky to be here at the most beautiful season of the year. And Her Excellency Yasmin Amneshed, she has arrived in Korea 2 weeks ago. It's very new, and you are lucky to see this beautiful scenery. And unfortunately, we don't have many students here because they are enjoying outside the scenery. And they are not interested in studying these days. For this year's 7th GC report, the Center for Government Competitiveness focused on an attention-worthy global trend, which is the speeding of technological advancement and dynamically increasing attention of government to actively lead such a process. Nowadays, the so-called future technologies such as auto-driving cars, artificial intelligence chips for smartphone, drone-based military surveillance or tech are within our hand. They are yet to be found everywhere and affect our daily lives, but the future is expected to be surely different from how we live now. Therefore, we considered raising a question regarding the future is most significant in 2019. How can the government take a valid role for the fourth industrial revolution? In other words, how can the successful application of new technology not only help each country's national economy, but also extend to a wide range of the policy sectors and even to the different parts of the world? Our research team began to tackle this concurrent question by looking closely at the intensifying government competitiveness for technological superiority. And we become interested in the term the new next technological Cold War, which is expected to greatly destabilize the global economy furthermore in the future. We then processed to analyze a handful number of countries for recent changes, focusing on the role of the government in preparation for the fourth industrial revolution. As always, we have organized a list of non-OECD countries by ranking. The result will be shared soon after this opening remark, and hopefully a very active open discussion will take place afterward. We prepared this conference specifically to have a more in-depth discussion with you here. From this opportunity, we wish to not only get a real and direct insight from the experts and specialists, but also to build meaningful relationships that shine more light onto our research efforts. From the beginning of GC development, my vision included creating usable and vital data warehouse for researches and realistic consulting purposes. I envisioned some countries in developing stage will find the vision of GC and information gathered quite useful for their future growth and decision making. Particularly, focusing on policy sectors differently from the OECD to non-OECD countries was to better grasp the tangible issues at hand for the two distinguishable sets of countries, which are OECD countries and non-OECD countries. Hopefully, our research team's dedication to develop an index using systematic and numerical data for improving government competitiveness provokes your interest and attention. I'm confident that our GC Center reflects some major domestic concerns and current international challenges triggered by many unprecedented global events. In order to identify these, it is crucial to determine the policy strengths and weaknesses based on a systematic approach. Our research strength being the systematic approach, hopefully this year's government competitiveness report provides practical insights to countries around the world for necessary strategies for improving their government competitiveness. Thank you in advance for your honest input and again for your time being here with us. I hope you find today's conference meaningful and enjoyable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Im, for the welcoming address. Next, Dr. Jung Gi-hoon will make a presentation regarding this year's GC report. Of the special topic that we have visited and also the GC report. Dr. Chung is a senior researcher at the Center of Government Competitiveness. Hope his presentation will help you better understand our GC index and how this year's results show by each policy areas. Please welcome Dr. Chung.
I guess I wouldn't, Mike, you can hear me well, right? Hi, everyone, and thank you, distinguished guests from the respective embassy. It is a pleasure and honor to be speaking in front of distinguished group. Let me begin by perhaps explaining why we chose this theme. For the past several years, I think the topic of the fourth industrial revolution has gained much interest around the world. We think that equally important topic, but that has received less attention is what is the role of the government in the context of the fourth industrial revolution? So it is in this context that we are hosting this conference, and we hope that this conference can serve as a venue and a platform for policymakers and academics to engage in a discussion. So my presentation has two key takeaway points. First is that whether we perceive the Industrial Revolution as a great danger or a great promise depends on the role of the government. And second, to have an in-depth discussion on role of the government in this revolution, we need a good, reliable data on government capacity and competitiveness. We argue that existing data have limitations, and we offer better data, especially for the non-OECD countries. So now let me begin. So a simple question of what this revolution is and why we should care. The fourth revolution is also called technological revolution in the context of previous revolution. So to explain this technological revolution in one sentence, basically it's improvement in technology leading to increasing productivity, increasing to production. So in the first revolution, technology of steam enabled mechanized production. In the second revolution, electricity enabled mass production for the first time. Third revolution enabled automated production through computer. Now we're in the fourth revolution using intelligence. What do we mean by intelligence? Imagine a connected computers that can visualize the whole production chain, process of production. Computers can communicate, and they can make autonomous decisions to better produce than the previous previous revolutions have done. So in a way, the machines are getting smarter. And there's three reasons why the particular fourth industrial revolution is not just a linear progression, but exponential from the previous revolution. Its velocity, the speed of current breakthroughs, has no historical precedent. And second, its scope. It's disrupting almost every industry in every country. And third, its impact on the systems in terms of production, management, and governance. So, where are we today then? To gauge intelligence of artificial intelligence, many experts use image processing and language processing. And based on these measures, in the past 10 years, artificial intelligence has made significant progress. To the point that some argues that artificial intelligence, whether we know it or not, is everywhere. Is it? Let me give you some example. So in Singapore, self-driving cars, Singapore is an industry leader in this part. So since 2016, Singapore has self-driving cars on a pilot test project. On the west side of Singapore, autonomous cars and normal cars mingle together on the road. And of course, given that it's a pilot projection, the cars have to have a human inside for now and have a speed limit of 30 kilometers. Singapore government hopes to use this technology to develop autonomous taxi and also autonomous public transportation. And using these technologies, the Singaporean government hopes to resolve or provide solutions to the aging society and the shortage of driver issues. According to some reports, for the first time this year, in the Wall Street, computer running portfolio investments have exceeded the humans investment for the first time. 3D printing is also a critical technology today. And using this technology, you can replace your fractured bones in 3 weeks. So the process goes as follows. You take a picture of your bone, fractured bone, using a 3D X-ray, and with the complete 3D data of your bone, you will print it through the 3D printer. After that, you will extract a sample of your fat tissue and extract stem cells from it and fill the bone. This all in 3 weeks. Internet of Technology is also important technology in today's world. It's used by Tesla electric charged cars. So what it does is it's basically a connectivity, right? It allows machines to be connected through a centralized control. So in Tesla's case, with a stroke of a keyboard from Silicon Valley, where I'm from, you could control all the connected machine. So for example, there was a recent hurricane in the United States, and with a stroke of a keyboard, all Tesla cars were able to have more battery power through the control. So this has a promising potential in the areas of disaster management, where a single stroke and a control by the government can protect its citizens. So what are the policy implications? They are groundbreaking, but they are also disruptive in the sense that they are fundamentally changing the way we live. And these technologies are also transforming social, economic, and political system in unpredictable ways. In this context, a fair question can be asked. Does this revolution bring greater promise or greater danger? One of the main concerns with new technology is in the security side. As securities develop, so does the types of warfare. Today, we're in the age of digital warfare, moving towards the artificial intelligence. By digital warfare, I mean cyber terror and drone attacks. And a lot of experts today are concerned that once we reach the artificial intelligence, you will see potential risk where computers trading in the Wall Street and self-autonomous cars, they are beneficial for us, but they could be compromised by the cyber attack and will be catastrophic to us. And there's also economic and social concerns. A lot of experts are worried that the new technology would raise inequality. Even though the incomes would significantly rise, the distribution will be very uneven. For example, the people or the country that have the technology will gain the most, and due to these concerns, it would further exacerbate inequality. Labor market is also an issue where machines may substitute labor across entire economy, bringing social unrest. But there are also reasons for great promise and great benefits. So the gains from the technology is assumed to be tremendous by improving transportation and communication costs. An example is Amazon or e-commerce. 25 years ago, you couldn't imagine buying something through e-commerce. But today, it's sort of the currency of today's economy. So it is this kind of new market-creating growth that is expected from these technologies. And these technologies would also allow us to conserve and regenerate natural environment by making us be less reliant on fossil fuels and potentially undoing the damages done from the previous revolutions. The technologies would also enhance quality and satisfaction of life, as evidenced by the example of replacing the fractured bones. And finally, the technologies can reduce inequality by shaking existing orders. So is the revolution a great promise or danger? So to answer this question, I think we can learn lessons from previous revolutions. So what is for sure, what is inevitable is that every revolution has winners and losers. In the previous industrial revolutions, by bringing new order, or some would say new production regimes, it brought opportunities for some countries to thrive, and some countries obviously not to thrive. If the fourth revolution is fundamentally altering existing order in an exponential way, it also means that there's a greater opportunity for developing countries to thrive and take advantage of it. We can learn this through the case of South Korea. South Korea, from the previous third industrial revolution, utilized the new order or the production regime and made a jump from one of the poorest countries to one of the high-income countries. By this, we can learn several lessons from Korea's case. First is governance, as the last slide talked about institutions. So in 1960s was the period where a lot of scholars were saying governance based on separation of power and check and balance were important and were the currency of development. But those that type of governance also has limitations in the sense that it promotes bureaucratic competition, which could waste resources. Given that a lot of non-OECD and developing countries have resource constraints, this was very problematic. In the context of Korea, Korea used this harmonious competition, which is also can be considered a positive competition, where the competition is not to kill each other, but through a harmonious mindset, bring a collective outcome. Second lesson is to invest in human resources. Korea was known for high educational level of public service employees. And this was possible because despite lacking resource in 1960s, the government sent its young scholars abroad to study to obtain advanced degrees. And government, also seeing the importance of education, also provided free primary education to all citizens to secure domestic human resources. And when the country needed higher level of skilled resources, the country redirected its policies to tertiary education, centering on engineering, science, and technology. But I think the most important lesson is this third one, is that the role of the government matters. Without capable government, such governance based on positive competition and human resource policies would not have been possible. So what do I mean by this? Effective policies, what I mean by this is forward-looking human resource policies. So the government knew that despite lacking its resource in the 1960s, investment in human resource was important and would pay dividend in the future, thus making that decision an investment. Second, it was a governance based on merit. It hired capable public servants based on their merits. And second, it was able to enact successful education policies because bureaucracies were insulated from political influence and also from special interests. So in the context of today, what is the specific roles of the government to prepare and thrive in this revolution? First is to decide on the direction of the technology. As we all know, technology itself is not evil, right? It's really what matters is how we use it. So the governments can decide to use and invest in technologies that can promote satisfaction and improve quality of its citizens, or invest to increase threat and attacks on others. Second is invest in the fourth, education. Regardless of which revolution we are in, one critical component of every revolution will always be the human resource. And most experts seem to agree on this. So to elaborate on this point, of course, when the revolutions progress in different revolutions, the skill set and the type of education demanded will be different. But my point is that education itself will always be important. Third, promoting inclusive and forward-looking policies. What do I really mean by this? Today, I think the world is centering or starting to center on promoting shared economy. I'm sure you have all heard of Airbnb, Uber, and Tara. Tara is in Korea. So these are the shared economy of homes and transportation. And they are good because they provide good quality while providing at a lower price compared to the existing service providers. But what that means is that there's going to be a backlash, right, from the existing service providers. So this has been going on in South Korea for the companies of ride-sharing transportation, and Singapore has also experienced similar issues. So in this context, the role of the government is to have policies that are inclusive of the existing order, yet are forward-looking. Similar can be found here. Have you guys heard of telemedicine system? Anyone? I learned what it is doing this research. So what it is that it's really cool because to get your medical checkups, and if you're sick, you don't actually have to physically go to the doctor's office. You can actually get service through the existing available technology. And of course, from the previous slide, this will have a backlash from the existing service providers. So in the case of Korea, Korean industry also wanted to promote this kind of service, but the Korean Medical Association has been opposing this. But despite the opposition, recently, July 24th, 2019, the government approved such practice for the first time in Korea, although only for certain regions. So again, the question, potential danger or greater promise? And it really depends on the government. And I think this graph captures everything that I want to say. As we are facing and progressing towards the fourth industrial revolution, the responsibility of government will be burdensome due to the complexity of the fourth industrial revolution. So therefore, compared to the previous revolution, government's scope and capacity is unparalleled. And if the governments fail behind, this would mean that they fail to employ and regulate new technologies, and they may not thrive. But at the same time, if they can meet the challenges, they can reap handsome reward, as the case of South Korea in the previous revolution. And as I have stated earlier, we need in-depth discussion on then how the government, what are the role of the government in this fourth industrial revolution. And to do so, we need good data on government capacity and government competitiveness. It is in this context that our measure of government competitiveness can provide significant contribution. So before I talk about our GC index, I think I've talked too much. So perhaps we can take 5 to 10 minute break. Are you guys okay with that? Okay, thank you. See you in 5 to 10 minutes. Thank you. Okay, I think we are good to go. Okay, so now let me begin. So at this time, in this session, will be introducing to you our index of government competitiveness, which we believe is especially useful for analyzing non-OECD countries. But first, let me begin by introducing existing indices of government competition and other similar ones. As you can see in this slide, many indices of government competition or similar indices are produced by different institutes around the world, and you are probably familiar with many of them. So for example, IMD is producing World Competitiveness Ranking. The World Economic Forum also has its own Global Competitiveness Index, and as you may know, World Bank has its Worldwide Governance Indicator and also Quality of Government. So now this begs a following question. Why do we need another index on government competitiveness when similar indices already exist? A simple answer is, according to previous studies, existing indices face limitations when analyzing developing countries. Primarily, these indices are not compatible with developing countries because these indices overemphasize Western-style reforms with too much emphasis on economic aspects and markets. Thus, not only do these indices not consider the institutional context of developing countries, they also may, for that reason, lack policy relevance. Our point is addressed in this graph. A key takeaway in this graph is that depending on country's stage of economic development level, the scope of government's role and functions differ. Existing indices introduced in the previous slide, however, do not fully reflect a different economic stage and other contexts of each country. Simply, government's role and functions of developing nations not only differ with developed nations, but arguably the scope may be more broad. So to overcome the weakness of the previous indices, our GC index newly considered these three factors. First, we try to include broader welfare enhancement by government into our GC index. Second, we apply the system theory to our measurement structure to include a temporal aspect. Third, we considered each country's different economic development stage for constructing our GC index to reflect each nation's different needs. In this context, we define government competitiveness as the power of government to, in light of various constraints, take resources from in and out of the country and improve social, economic, and cultural conditions of the nation in order to sustainably enhance citizens' quality of life. So more specifically, one of the theoretical foundations of our GC index is the system theory, as I mentioned in the previous slides. By applying this systems theory, our GC index covers the whole process of systematic government workflows from the input, throughput, output, and outcome. And our GC index is especially focused more on the throughput stage than the other stages. As the sub-dimensions of this throughput stage, you can see in this slide, we included human, financial, and institutional capacities of government. And to better capture each country's throughput stage in detail, we have also started carrying out the GC Global Survey in 50 developing countries. And as you can see here, we can predict potential change of countries based on the results of our GC rankings in the input and throughput stages. It is because throughput can be understood in terms of policy developing process, which can contribute to the output and outcome of government's efforts. And in the below, the key takeaway point from the below non-OECD and OECD labels is that we use different policy subgroups for measuring our GC index data, depending on whether a country is included in the OECD or non-OECD countries. We do this because it is appropriate to consider the different developmental context. So this is the different GC policy areas for different issues. So for OECD subgroups, we include culture and tourism and also research and development. But for non-OECD countries, we do not include these two sub-indexes, but we include infrastructure, which is a critical component for development for non-OECD countries. So our GC index, as you will see, we used statistical z-score to give our scores and ranks. What this means is that small differences in the scores may result in a huge difference based on this statistical approach. Therefore, we urge you not to focus on the overall scores, but try to focus on the policy and the sub-policy areas, which would have a much more implications. Finally, again, we strongly recommend you to focus on the result of the throughput stage rather than other stages. It is because we believe that social progress is implemented through government efforts by providing proper regulations, supportive environments, and freedom of citizens. These are incorporated into the throughput stage measures. Okay, so now let me begin the analysis of the invited countries. So this is the overall scores. As you can see. And I'll come back to the scores for roundtable. So let me just, I'll move on with the presentation. So this is how we show the scores. So if you look at the yellow circle is the score of the countries, subsectors. And the black circle is the average of the respective group. So in this way, you can see the scores of your countries and respective policy areas and how they are doing relative to the average. So Bolivia, we have strong points are environment, education, and economy. And the weak points are in ICT, agriculture and food, and infrastructure. And input and outcome are strong compared to throughput and output. And in terms of the average, it's almost same as the average of the non-OECD countries. Since they're not here, I'll skip. And Russia, the overall score is almost same as the average of second level country. Strong points are in ICT, education and environment, and the weak points being in governance, safety, and infrastructure. Outcome was relatively weaker than input and throughput and output. In Rwanda, the overall score is slightly lower than the average. Strong points are in ICT, economy, and environment, and the weak point being in the education, governance, and safety. And by the rankings of the stage, output and throughput are relatively stronger than input and outcome. So Zambia. So this is, because we are focusing on the fourth industrial revolution, what we did was we showed scale of the ICT. So x-axis is a two-way plot. X-axis is the ICT scale. ICT scale is like a infrastructure. And ICT utilization is the how to utilize, apply application of the ICT technology. So if you look at it in this graph, for non-OECD countries, Singapore here, I don't know if my mouse is working, is on top, and Korea is here. And this is also for OECD countries. And I also did an analysis of the invited countries. So here, Russia is here. Rwanda, despite ICT scale being here, it has a really high ICT utilization, right? So what this means is that Rwanda, has a great market potential to exponentially increase its ICT capacity if ICT infrastructure is additionally invested. So that's sort of the conclusion we had. Lastly, if you want to look at the reports from previous years, and if you also want to, if you're bored of me talking, if you really actually want to read the rankings and our methodologies and the data from the previous year, this is our beautiful website. I think we have one of the best websites compared to other government competitiveness rankings. And next year you can come and give us feedback on this. So the website is gcenter.net. So, okay, thank you very much, and I look forward to your comments and discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jung. Once again, that was a very in-depth and informative presentation. I think I would like to take this momentum into the open discussion. Since I think it would be better for me to here. So I think since we want to hear some of your ideas that you have of the presentation and things today, and I want to maybe by asking you to perhaps lightly introduce yourself, and then I would like to also target some key issues that are raised today. And I think that Dr. Chung's raised a question in the presentation that like the fourth industrial revolution could be a great promise or has a potential danger. And this signifies that many opportunities exist, but there are many weak spots to the rapid growth. And so I would like to ask the representatives that how do you envision this fourth industrial revolution? And perhaps it would be helpful if you could elaborate on how the understanding of this future revolution is in your home country. Would you like if we could just comfortably start.
You can start with introduction.
Yeah, in introduction, and I thought that maybe you would like to think ahead of like some of the questions we have, and so I just prepared some questions so we can get it going, and also inputs are free. Feel free to express your idea and understandings of today's presentation.
Criticisms are awful welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for those who didn't choose to look at the view and come to see us. Thank you very much. I think it was very interesting. We do look at all the other competitiveness index. So it was interesting to see another methodology, another approach. I think as a government, we do use some of the ones you talked about, the World Bank, the ease of doing business, as a roadmap, and to inform also how to track the different reforms we want to do. So it's also interesting to see another type of roadmap that can inform choice and priorities as a government. If I was to introduce myself, it's a bit difficult because all of you talked about yourselves, it's very interesting, intelligent people. So it's very intimidating to say anything. I've been, like Professor Ledi said, I've been in Korea for only 2 weeks now. I was previously in the Middle East, and I was working in Rwanda before that. And not in the capacity of a diplomat, but also in Europe sometimes. So coming to Korea is quite an interesting journey for me. It's a very new culture, and it complements what I'm doing before. So looking forward. My background is economy, so of course I'll be inclined to this kind of conversation. I think I will let my neighbor introduce
First of all, I would like to express my appreciation for such invitation for this event. It was very interesting. According to my background is IT, so related to business. I was studying most of aviation university as well as IT aviation. So that meets my profile. I think the fourth industrial revolution. My studies. And in this regard, I think it's very important for a government to think how to make better the common life of its people. And of course, Russia has drawn very much attention to these problems. I think see how it's going in other countries, especially in Asia, where there is Singapore, the Republic of Korea, in Japan, and other countries which are at the top of advanced countries in this sphere. So what can I say? At the moment, I don't have such digits in mind to provide some specific comments on this report. Also, there is, I think, missing some part of number 3 about, list of the teams. So, I would propose to discuss this material with our relevant authorities in Russia, maybe some institutions, and then to provide you more accurate information. At the same time, I would like to also express my appreciation for such kind of records, because competitive work is very important to see what's going on in general in the world. Some of Russian institutions also provide such work, but I'm not sure this is for disseminated with government institutions